Move over, Kanye. Step aside, Joe Biden. There's another Joe gunning for the 2024 Democratic ticket.
This crazy bastard's running for president of the United States.
Joe Exotic.
Joe
Exotic.
Joe Exotic. Remember Joe Exotic
Joe
from Netflix?
Exotic.
Hell no. It doesn't matter who I piss off or who I offend. I'm fighting for what's right.
Joe Exotic, the now incarcerated Tiger King, has launched a presidential campaign, even though he's serving a 21-year prison sentence.
I know nothing about it. He has 22 years for what? What did he do?
Joe Exotic is currently serving 21-year sentence for multiple charges, including animal abuse and attempted murder for hire plot to kill animal rights activist Carol Baskin.
You think he didn't do it? Are you on his side? Are you recommending a pardon?
Gay, lesbian, bisexual? I don't give a fuck.
Would you recommend a pardon?
To all you lawmakers out there, I got a gift for you so you can clean your dicks off before you butt fuck the rest of this country.
I'll take a look. Is that Joe Exotic? That's Joe Exotic.
Let's put a stop to some of this crooked shit going on in this country.
Well, I got friendship bracelets too, bitch. How about that?
Put aside the fact that I am gay and that I'm in prison for now. They have taken everything I've ever worked for, and it's time we take this country back.
He said, I'm gay, but vote for me.
Take this country broke back again.
Reality. Reality is sometimes stranger than fiction.
Write me in for president. I'll guarantee goddamn to you we'll straighten this country out.
We were supposed to bring you an exclusive interview with Mr. Exotic himself, so we found the next best guest. Mike Robison is Joe Exotic's press secretary. He joins me now with his monkey Winston.
Alan, Joe is unavailable to do interviews right now. He's currently being tortured in solitary confinement. His presidential press secretary can do the interview on Joe's behalf. How about Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central?
Sounds good to me.
And now, in Alan's Archives presentation.
There we go. And if you can start with your introduction, sorry about that.
Got it. No worries, man. My name's Michael Robison. Best way to describe me as a person is a husband, a father, a serial entrepreneur. But probably what most people know me for is my passion of working with animals, doing life with primates in particular. That is what we kind of built our notoriety. That's how a lot of people know me around the world. And that has then also put me into the circle of friendship and a great relationship with Joe Exotic, who people know from the Tiger King. He's, became a cultural icon through the show. This year he's chosen to run on the Democratic ticket for 2024 as a presidential candidate. And he's asked me to come along and serve as his press secretary. So his mouthpiece during this season of campaign, and not just the presidential campaign, but his own campaign and his own story. And so here we are, to be able to discuss what that looks like and the craziness. Because we got to call it that. You can't. Listen, it's Joe. There's no other way to describe it. But the beauty, the crazy, and the awesomeness of Joe Exotic. Joe Maldonado is an incredible character, and I'm honored every day to be able to stand alongside my friend, to support him, and to speak in his stead when he's not able.
Right, yeah, and that's another thing is that not only is what Joe Exotic doing extremely unique, but what you're doing is extremely unique. He is running for president in confinement. He is locked up. So not only him running for president in that state is unique, but you being his secretary, I can't imagine, through that unique experience, what that must be like for you. Who are you asking for advice? How are you, how are you getting through this?
It is really an interesting kind of a weird place to be, right? So currently we're in this position where Joe, I believe, I don't think I'm wrong about this, I believe he's the first actual presidential candidate to actually be running a full campaign as a federal inmate in the Department of Justice here in the United States, and currently is in solitary confinement, which we'll get into that, as we talk, which has put me in a position to basically be the face, the talking head for this campaign during this particular season of this cycle. So it is an interesting thing. And like you said, you are asking the questions like, who do you lean into? Do you ask for advice? I've been lucky enough. I say lucky, but I call it blessed. But I'm very grateful for it to have some great relationships with folks who are veteran lawmakers and politicians. That can be both good and bad, depending on how you see our system here in the United States right now. And then individuals who have worked closely with politics, culture, those sorts of things, and not just here domestically, but internationally as well. During my years, I worked with NGOs in international development, both in economics and humanitarian development in other countries, developing nations. And so that has allowed me a really unique opportunity then to lean into those relationships and garner advice, garner understanding, probably more so. We can, unpack this if we want, but one of the things that makes Joe unique is that, this campaign and his purpose in doing this is really to return America to its people, to put the rights and freedoms back in the hands of America, because we have forgotten that the folks who are elected and serve in our government serve at our pleasure by our election, funded by our dollars. And we do not work for them or serve them. They actually work for us and serve us. And so, what's interesting is that we can lean into political policy or strategy or all those sorts of things. But the reality is we need to lean back into human nature, which is we take back our rights and freedoms. So for me, leaning into those, the advice or the input of the veterans in that space is to garner wisdom that I don't have, because they've done it longer, to understand or have perspective or insights that I wouldn't have. But when it comes to strategy or purpose, and what Joe has set this campaign forth to do, and what our team is doing, is to lean into our natural inclination of fighting for, preserving, and defending our inalienable rights as human beings.
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up, because you were, talking about his purpose, right, for doing all this. I would like to know, as you must know, a lot of people think it's a joke, and he's been having to make a point to say, no, I am serious about this. So what makes this not a joke? What is that purpose that Joe is going for that we should take seriously? What are some of those examples?
I think there are three main things that are really important with Joe's purpose and campaign for 2024. Number one, it is giving America back to its people, right? This is a nation, and we often forget this, because the talking point in America today is defend our democracy. We are a democratic system that supports a constitutional republic. And that Constitution, it supports a governance for the people and by the people, which is a republic. And we forget that. We have a democratic process for election and selection of our leadership, but the Constitution itself supports our inalienable rights to live with the freedom of faith, the freedom of home, the freedom of business, the right to bear arms, all of these things that are protected. Those rights are not given to us by the Constitution. They are protected by the Constitution. And so for Joe, the number one thing is to return America to its people, and those rights that are inherently ours, not given by a document, not given by a government, but inherently ours as human beings, and to remind America first that it belongs to us. So that is the first thing. The second thing that I think is really important that Joe stands for is reducing government. Right? So one of the things that this nation was founded on was the idea of the reduction of governing bodies, right? We left Europe the founding fathers left Europe for taxation without representation, over governance, overbearing, state legislating faith and religion and school and education and all these things that sadly we have become as a nation. And so for Joe, it is to reduce that, again, for the purpose of that number one thing, to return America back to its people. And then thirdly, which I'm super passionate about, has a lot to do with Joe's story, is also in that reduction of government is eliminating the agencies themselves that overgovern America. That would be anything that falls under the alphabet category, right? The CIA, FBI, ATF, IRS, all these. Yes, everything in itself that is identified by an alphabetical acronym to exist is an overbearing, non-legislative and yet legislatively active branch of our government that is non-elected for the most part, and has an overbearing existence in our reality as human beings and American citizens. And so for Joe, his purpose in doing this is to say, it's time to wake up as America. It's time for us to take this nation back. And if that means something has to essentially, for lack of a better term, because Joe would say it a lot less eloquently. Joe would say it the way Joe says things, but let it burn to the ground, it's okay. I've told a number of folks as we've had this conversation in the last week that I think one of the things that I love about Joe is that he doesn't live in what I call the blue ribbon culture where everybody gets a blue ribbon, everybody wins. It's okay to fail. And it's okay for us to fail as a nation. And that scares a lot of people, right? Because we are this great, international power. We were a great international power is a great way to put it. But it's okay for a bank to fail, for a business to fail, for an idea to fail, for a law not to work, for all those things. And we've got to return our nation to a place where it's okay to fail, because failure makes us more resilient. It makes us smarter. It makes us stronger. And it's the reason that we were able to make it, because we had to fight battles we lost in wars that we ultimately were able to win. And so we have to return ourselves as a nation and as a people to a place that it's okay to fail, and that we're strong enough to handle it when we go through it. And so I love that about Joe, because Joe's in a position today where this entire legacy he built for decades as this purveyor of an animal park, protecting endangered species, sharing that beauty and the story of those animals with people, and Joe's life in general, just his freedoms and everything, those are all gone for Joe. They've disappeared. Everybody kind of gets sucked into the character of Joe Exotic. I mean, we fell in love with the character. We love the character. It's fun. It's crazy. You don't know what to do with it, and that's why you love it, because you don't have a category for it.
I'm from Florida.
But there's also
Florida, and I just really connected with him.
But yeah, here's the thing. I think that there's a lot of misconception too around the persona that you see. Now, Joe's what you see is what you get. There's nothing different on camera, off camera, behind the scenes. Joe's Joe. There's nothing different about Joe when everybody's around or when nobody's around. Joe is Joe, and that's what makes him magical to people. That's why people are attracted, because there is an authenticity to that, right? But there are misconceptions, obviously, not just in Joe's instance of his legal case, his conviction, the things that he's facing, his imprisonment right now, but also just in who Joe is. People have a misconception that because he had this meteoric rise to fame during COVID lockdowns, because Tiger King became this thing, that somehow Joe must have resources, he's wealthy, he's got all this stuff at his disposal. People forget that Joe was already in federal prison when Tiger King hit. That the reality of Tiger King coming to life and becoming what it did actually cost Joe everything. He lost his animal park, he lost any money and any resources, his home, his life. I mean, everything came apart. Joe has nothing to lose at this point. And I think that's what makes Joe a really beautiful figure in today's space when we talk about running for president in 2024, when we talk about your personal agenda. Joe has nothing to lose. He really has nothing to gain. It's not like being in that office. We know, we've watched it, no matter how old you are, no matter how long you've lived on this planet, you watch somebody take office, their 4-year term, they age 25 years. It shaves decades off your life. You don't gain. Now, crooked politicians gain plenty of money, but you don't gain a personal value out of being in that particular space necessarily. So for Joe, it's not about what I gain, and it's definitely not about what you have to lose, because there's nothing to lose. And so for Joe, it is, I will put myself on the line for the American people to step up and defend and return freedoms to the people of this nation.
Right. Well, you were talking about everything that Joe's going through right now, right? And balancing that, juggling that while running for president. One thing I want to ask about is he's been dealing with so much corruption, right? Ever since, as you said, the show came out, he lost everything. The Department of Justice is really screwing him over. How should we see Joe overcoming that, right? How is he not going to be so sour if he's running, for president? To me, it says a lot about him, right, and how much he believes in this country. Department of Justice, these things, right, that are corrupted. He's going to be working with them, right? How's he going to face that?
Yeah. I think, first of all, you lean in just to his own person. This is where it is a beautiful thing for Joe. It's personal. It's not like it's an idea or some concept out there that he's just bought into a talking point, right? It's real to Joe. Joe is sitting in prison on a wrongful conviction. Folks can get over to Joe's presidential campaign website, joeexotic2024.com/evidence. They can look at this. Like, we have under affidavits, sworn testimony, documents, audio recordings, hundreds of them, from the very individuals who put him where he is today, admitting to corruption, collusion, false testimony, perjury, all those sorts of things. And the Department of Justice, what people need to recognize, I think we can lay the groundwork to answer the question properly for you, is that people need to look at that to understand that the Department of Justice actually has a reason to ignore what Joe is going through today, because should this get enough attention, they've got essentially mud on their face from this, and they've delayed, like he's had for 18 months now, he's had an appeal waiting. He should go to retrial, should be heard. The testimony and the evidence should be entered. People forget that in his first trial, because of that collusion and corruption, they did not allow evidence into the courtroom that should have been considered. He would not be there were that the case. But they're waiting out a statute of limitations so that they can save their own federal agents from being in trouble for having committed these actual crimes, right? So for Joe, it's very personal because he's living it out and he is being used as a pawn to protect the Department of Justice. So for Joe to face it, it's really a matter of, if you are willing to sacrifice me, you can bet when I am on the other side of this coin, I have no qualms about dealing with this. So when Joe makes a statement, because we have a lot of candidates out there in today's race that are talking about reduction of government, let's get rid of all the alphabet agencies, all of this stuff. It's ideology to them. It's not reality, right? Like, these are not individuals who have been subjected to the harsh reality of a corrupt system. In fact, the vast majority of the candidates who are on the docket for 2024 are part of the system. And so they have no incentive to dismantle the system whatsoever. They will say things to entice the American listener to maybe offer their vote to that person. Whereas for Joe, it is intensely personal, and it's not coming out of bitterness. Joe's general heart and attitude, and it's as genuine as it comes. And for those who have the privilege of knowing Joe personally, understand this. Joe's attitude is, if they can do it to me, they'll do it to you. And they've already done it to me. I have nothing to lose. So let me put myself out there. I'll sacrifice me for the sake of protecting someone else of having to go through this. Let me protect the American people. And it's not about martyrdom. I mean, it's just not like Joe's out there like, I want to be this big martyr for this whole thing. He's already been martyred. We're way past that point. At this point is, they've already done all this to me. Let's go. Like, let's attack this thing. Let's grab the bull by the horns. Let's address the issue. Let's call it out. Let's put some truth back in the system and let people see what's really happening in this country. And let's give it back to the people. Right? We think about things like the way our justice system was created over all of these years when it was set up. The idea of trial by jury. You go to trial by jury of your peers. But in today's world, who are your peers? I mean, we live in a social place. You and I are talking over the internet, thousands of miles apart, having a conversation about something. This didn't happen back then. For news to travel from me to you, 100 years ago when this system was created, it took weeks or months, right. In fact, And so the jury of peers were people who knew you. There were people years ago that may have actually been active in taking someone's life but did not get convicted of murder because the extenuating circumstances or character or those things it's not an advocation of allowing people off the hook. The point is that in today's world, things become circumstantial more than substantial. And so I think for Joe, it is the only way to return that to the people is to dismantle it, right? And to open up these systems and allow people to see them, allow the American people the right to understand that when you make a decision by voting, or where do your tax dollars go? Where do your decisions lead us? What is happening behind the scenes? And again, it's really hard to look at a country with 330 plus million people in it and look at a room with a few hundred legislators, and then assume that the representation of the people is real. And I think it's time for us to do some things like this country was founded on, and Joe's really passionate about this, is return the power back to the states, allow them to govern within their, again, people forget, yes, we are a nation, but we are a federation of independent states. So we are a federation of other countries, basically. Each state really was founded like its own nation with a federal trade agreement to operate together financially to support a bigger economy. And so it's this idea of returning us back to our roots and allowing people to, again, break it down into those smaller pieces and allow a smaller form of government to protect us and allow us to protect and defend our own freedoms.
And with these goals of Joe, right, and these things that he's going for, what are some of the benefits that we the people can expect, if we're voting for Joe and he's dismantling these systems?
Number one is honesty and transparency. I think it's one of the biggest missing elements in our country today, because Joe's the type person to expose the truth. Joe's going to call it out like it, and even if that means Joe is subjected to a place where he's liable for that truth, right? Because he's not afraid of the consequence of that truth. And I think that's what a real leader is. I think it takes somebody with enough, fortitude and character to step up to the plate and say, it's time for us to really expose the truth. Like, listen, nobody's perfect. Like, people are going to lead and they're going to make mistakes. That's okay. We have to identify mistakes. When you think about an athlete, right? They're not going to, it's like Michael Jordan said 1,000 times, he may have, had scoring records, but how many baskets were missed in the process of reaching that record, right? So it's not about perfection. It's about transparency. It's about authenticity in the process. I think it's the number one thing you'll see from Joe. And, as Joe pursues this election, regardless of the outcome, the one thing that you can count on from a candidate like Joe Exotic is authenticity and transparency. And so I think it's the number one thing we need in this nation. But I also think that courage and fortitude are also really required. He's not influenced by money. He's not influenced by influence. I mean, look, Joe's one of the most recognizable characters on the planet in the last 3 years. Given in the last couple of weeks that you've had a federal inmate like Ted Kaczynski pass away, Joe's probably the most recognizable federal inmate in the prison system in the United States of America. That notoriety means nothing to him. It just happens to be his circumstance. So it's not a need for notoriety. For Joe, it is, I've been given this place. I should steward it well, use it for the rights of this country that I love and the people who deserve a better future. And so I think those two primary things are driving forces that people can expect from Joe. I think what I love, actually, to answer, though, is there are a lot of things that I don't know what to tell you to expect, because Joe is that authentic and genuine that if Joe's heart tells him to move in it, he's going to move in it, right? But he's going to do it for the good of the people. It's not for the good of Joe. And people often miss that. Again, the caricature of this person who sits in prison today is, the exploitation of animals for Joe's own good. That's not true in its entirety. And so I think people need to back up for a minute and allow for people to see Joe's heart outside the lens of a reality television show series, and allow people to see a human being who, yes, he's a wild card. Nobody's like Joe. Nobody's running around with their bleach mullet and weird outfits and guns strapped to their side and, unfiltered verbiage and petting tigers and playing with whatever. It's Joe's Joe, right? Yeah. Like, it's this iconic character that's created, and yet more than the character itself, as a genuine human being, he's not doing that as a character. He's doing that because that's Joe. And so it is real. And I think the American people need somebody who when they know what's happening behind closed doors, they don't have to scratch their head and wonder. Like, Joe's going to tell you, right. Whether you want to know or not, Joe's going to tell you. But the truth is, there's nothing to tell you behind a closed door, because he's going to show you the same thing when he's in front of your face as when nobody else is around. And so I think that's a long overdue reality for leadership in this nation, is that level of just a real human being.
Right. So Joe's going to be doing what's good for the people, not what's good for Joe. I know that there's some acts, some bills that got passed because of Carol Baskin, the Big Cat Safety Act and the Primate Safety Act, I believe. I don't know if she
Primate
was...
Safety Act is on the docket. That one's personal to me because my world in working with exotic animals is working with primates. So, I actually live here with me. I have two of probably the most viewed primates on the internet ever. We've got 10 million followers in collective, that pay attention to the animals that I do life with. That one's personal to me, but yes, these measures were passed. And I think, again, there's a lot of misnomer around this story of the Tiger King, or this idea of the animal rights activists. Let's just kind of dig into it from that side. I think that's really important. Animal rights activists kind of have applied human rights to animals, which is a really weird juxtaposition, right? So the idea of an animal in captivity has been equated to chattel slavery, which is the literal language used by some of these organizations like PETA to describe the idea of an animal in captivity. What they continue to forget, and the tigers are a great example, there are more tigers in captivity than in the wild.
Yes.
What gets left out of that narrative is that because of captive breeding, and they use things like, they bred junk tigers. That's a load of crock. Like that's a messy, that's so skewed. But I don't even have to dig in there. Here's the thing: because of captive breeding and protection of these animals over decades and hundreds of years. I mean, listen, throughout the history of humankind, animals have been kept in captivity by humans. We are the dominant creature on this planet. We are at the top of the food chain, okay? So, it's like we denied that. Like, there's something wrong with that. But, I'm sorry. I'm cool with that. Like, I'm glad to be at the top of the food chain and rule there, okay? But because of captivity of animals and captive breeding programs, animals like the tiger are no longer a critically endangered species that is literally at risk of being wiped off the planet. They also leave off the fact that there are about 5,000 acres of natural habitat left for tigers on the planet because of the growth of human population. Now, again, this is where you get into muddy waters, right? Like, we're overcrowded. Right. I don't know what part of the world or country you live in, but I can tell you this. I grew up in the South. There's times where I'm out driving, I don't see people for 30 miles. So I'm sorry, but overpopulation, yes, maybe in the cities. Yes, maybe we've congregated and overpopulated in certain metropolitan areas throughout the world. But yet at the same time, we do have nearly 8 billion people on this planet now. And as population continues, we're going to need more space. So therefore, we do encroach on natural habitat. And so what's interesting is the idea of captivity and captive breeding programs was not for the exploitation of animals, but rather the propagation and protection of those animals, right? And so, but we also forget that things like the Endangered Species Act and the Animal Welfare Act, these laws that have been in effect in America for decades, they also prohibit the natural protection of these animals. So, everybody who goes and argues, they should be in their natural habitat. Well, you pass laws that makes it actually a felony to even try to move that animal back into its natural habitat. But you're also negating the fact that an animal that's been in a domesticated situation, whether that's a zoo, a sanctuary, a private home, whatever that is also in danger of succumbing to a natural environment because they are missing elements that are crucial to survival in those environments. And the vast majority, over 86% of most wild animals who go into a reintroduction program are dead within 90 days. Maybe a predator, food instability, bacteria, viral infections, there's any number of things that come into play there. And so all of these things get left out of the conversation of animal rights. But then also like Joe's particular story of being in trouble for euthanizing a handful of tigers that were under his protection. People forget that because of those laws and the animal rights activists, you can't just euthanize a sick animal. You have to have permissions and all these things. And so Joe's move in a lot of those moments is out of compassion for the animal. Forget the laws. My job is to compassionately care for these animals. And they also leave out the fact that the animals that needed further help that Joe couldn't help at the time, those animal rights organizations who demonized him were the very ones he called and said, help me take care of it. So he's honored the system through the process, but these pieces get left out of the story, therefore creating this persona of a renegade on the wrong side, and the truth is that Joe has done more probably than most human beings on this planet to protect these animals, to honor these animals, and to share them. Now, this is a thing that people will grit back and forth in disagreement, but it's one thing that drives me. I know as we face these laws, the Primate Safety Act was signed into law by President Biden in December of 2022. The Primate Safety Act is on the docket. I don't think for one second that it won't have success passing. It breaks my heart, but it's a reality. And so when I look at that, that ends captive breeding programs of these animals. It puts them back in danger of becoming critically endangered again. It stops the propagation of them in any educational environment whatsoever. And so what happens is in a generation or two, no human being gets to experience the beauty of these animals, nor to also accept the awe and responsibility of being at the top of the food chain, which gives us the responsibility then to steward the protection long term, to make sure that my grandkids and great grandkids get the opportunity to experience these incredible creatures, right? So that there's never a moment lost on me in doing life with the primates that I have, that when my children or family members right now, eventually my grandchildren, get to experience these animals in a way that very few people on this planet will actually get to instill in them a love and admiration and a respect for nature, for creation, for these animals. And in the name of animal rights, we're wiping out something that is absolutely crucial, but also beautiful.
Recently, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she filed for impeachment, right? With not only Biden, also Merrick Garland, all these characters, who do you, since you're close to Joe, who do you see Joe teaming up with, to address these issues, and who is Joe gonna have to, face?
He's gonna face everybody. I mean, the reality is you've got a grassroots American candidate who's not a politician, which means it's Joe versus the politicians. I mean, that's the truth of it. And I don't. It's not that I think that all politicians are bad, or that I think all of those elected officials who sit in the Hill in D.C. Have the wrong agenda or the wrong heart for this country. I know some of them very well, and I do believe there are some good people there. I do believe the system's inherently broken. So I think for Joe, the teaming up is going to require Joe to lean into the least and the most unlikely places, because he needs other people that share his heart, right? And he needs people with courage who are not afraid of that system. When I look at it, Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to file articles of impeachment, but the truth is the system's so broken that I don't think anybody's got balls enough anymore to step up and follow through with it. And the truth is it's time to, and for all intent and purposes, time to wipe the slate clean. There are there's a lot of individuals with talking points of reduction of government, like I said, reduction of government or all these things, but it's not personal to them. There are also people that have everything to lose. Their entire career, their persona, their fortune, their whatever it is in their life is built on the idea of being in that system. Whereas for Joe and for a renegade outlier crowd of allies that could lead with him, there is nothing to be lost in losing the system, right? And so, there's folks out there in the political space today that say, Trump gets a second term, he's going to Schedule F, wipe the slate clean, fire everybody. That comes out of a place of vengeance, not out of a place of, it's a different mindset. And I think for Joe, it's not about the agenda of going in and just getting rid of everybody. It's going in and hitting the reset switch, genuinely hitting the reset switch and returning this nation back to its people. And in order to do that, then the people have to be there to lead, right? So, the fissure in our nation is not racism and sexuality and all these talking points that we have, all these flashpoints in culture today. There's a difference between a ruling elite and the average person. And what that really is just an indicator that the very thing that we came to this continent to establish a new country, we've just returned. History always repeats itself. Should we as human beings not learn and grow in that process? And I fear, sadly, that in the last probably 100 years specifically in this nation, as opposed to learning and growing, we have chosen to lean back into what is comfortable and easy. And we are repeating what led to the foundation of this country to begin with. So the question is, are we going to reset this country, or will there be a mass exodus to start another future story like America? I don't know what that is, and I certainly don't subjugate. My hope is that we are able to reclaim this nation and give it back to the people.
So, does Joe have a slogan yet? Campaign slogan?
You can't silence us. That's his campaign slogan.
That's great.
And I think that's incredibly, that was something we were already working on before our current situation with Joe being in solitary confinement. And I think it's incredible. I think it's just and I think that's what's important, because so much of today's space and place, whether it's mainstream media, social media, politics, all of those things, is about censorship. It's about the control of free speech. It's a fight over that control. And I think it's time for us to stop silencing each other. And that means, Elon Musk said this when he took over Twitter. Whether you like Elon, whether you don't, whether you agree with Elon, it doesn't matter. He made this comment. The reality of the freedom of speech and not silencing one another means you will be subjected to hearing things you do not like. But the reality is that is what founded this country to begin with, is that a group of men, whether they were all right or all wrong, whether they were pure-hearted or not, got into a room, agreed to disagree, and fought through those differences to establish a set of freedoms that gave us the right to live our life and choose our religion, choose our families, choose our business, build our homes, raise our families with complete autonomy, with the protection of a good financial system that supported the progress and allowed us to flourish as individuals. And so it's going to require us to go back to a place where I'm not offended by everything. I'm willing to speak the truth, and I'm willing to give you that exact same freedom back and not be offended by that. So, it's a talking point, obviously, in today's culture. Joe obviously is, openly gay. I have a husband. I'm openly gay, but it's not a talking point to me. I don't care. And I'm also okay. I grew up in a conservative Christian family in the South. That my having a husband is something that I was told, no, you don't do that. You don't, you have a traditional family, you have a wife, you have kids, you did. And I followed that rule for a long time. That's the way I built my life. And life changed. It's different, and truth comes out. My thing is, I'm okay with people disagreeing with that. And they have the right to do that. I don't judge them for that. They are not forced into a place to agree that I have a husband and that's just be okay. If they don't like that, that's okay. Yeah. We don't have to do life together. We don't have to be friends. It's the beauty of a big country. That is the beauty of a free world. And so whether it is that conversation, whether it is culture, race, food, politics, it doesn't matter. I mean, we can divide over anything in this country. We have to go back to a place where it's okay to be separated on certain things, but be united under the protection of each other's freedom and the inalienable rights as a human being to live your life. That's all. That was the only thing that mattered when this country came into existence.
Thank you for that. So, Michael, we got 2 minutes left. I want to know if you can answer this.
Sure.
What made you say, yeah, I'm going to be Joe Exotic's man. I'm going to be his voice for this? How'd you get here?
It's easy, because Joe is an authentic, real human being who is willing to fight for the good of others, regardless of what it costs him. That is a core value to me. The honesty, the transparency, those are core values to me. So it is easy, regardless of what public opinion is, no matter what people think. Like you said, people can look at it and say this campaign is a joke, or it's not real, or it's a parody. It's very real. And regardless of how people see me, I don't care. I care enough about the American people and the country that I was born into to fight to protect our freedoms and our future. And so it's easy to lean into that, to lean my voice into that, regardless of what people think or what they see in the end of this whole thing, to turn around and pay it forward to the American people, because I have been afforded a great life, and it wouldn't have happened anywhere else in the world like it did here. And I fear that the future may not hold that same beauty for others unless we stand up and fight.
Thank you so much, Michael. And just to, for a sign off, if you'd like to tell people where to go to get more information about Joe's campaign and also evidence that proves that he's not guilty.
Absolutely. Everybody can go over to joeexotic2024.com. So that's Joe, Joe, 2 E's. So I always have to specify this to make sure people know that. So it's EX Exotic. So joeexotic2024.com. You can find out about the campaign. You can participate in the campaign if you feel led to donate to that. We are a grassroots campaign. That's the beauty that we want to show people. You don't need millions of dollars to fight for the good of this country and to run a successful campaign. You can step up and move no matter what you have. But they can also go to that same website, so joeexotic2024.com/evidence. They can look at that. They can understand the corruption, the collusion, the things that have led to Joe being where he is today, and step up and be a voice to fight for Joe's freedom. But it's not just Joe's freedom. If they can do it to Joe, they can do it to you. So the more we fight for one another, the more we guarantee our freedoms for each other.
Thank you, Michael. You're the man. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely, bro.
What this country needs is a president that's gonna say, fuck you, we're not taking this shit no more.